Welcome, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
How you
Good.
doing? How's
Um,
your session?
they've all been really good so far. I've learned a lot about salt and had a good time. So, yeah.
Cool.
Um,
Let's hope that continues.
yeah, it should be good. I'm excited for yours. All right. I'm gonna just put a quick message in the chat. All right. So we've got about 3 minutes until our official start time. And I'll just mention to everybody that if you would like to, you can introduce yourself on the chat. Tell us why you're here at this presentation and what you're hoping to get out of it. Um, and I think it's going to be a good one. So feel free to introduce yourself and say hi. So just so you know, we're being joined by David, who's one of our developers on the SALT team here. And he is definitely interested to hear about how you're using AIX. If you want to mention why, you're welcome to, David.
Yeah, we like AIX, so
So does David. He says Python 3 is coming next. Oh, let's let David on. He can say hi for a second.
Hi.
This is David.
I don't particularly like AIX. I once got told, hey, could you port this to AIX at the turn of the century? You've only got 5 million and India wants 18 people in a team. So we ported eDirectory to AIX and made the date. And then the people who are going to use it, the French Internal Revenue Service equivalent, decided, oh, look, an NSA key appears in Windows. What's that doing there? We're going Mandrake. But
yeah, AIX has been around for a while. It's got a long and sordid history.
yes, I just wish they'd fix some of the tools, like update them. At this point, -Z with tar would be much nicer. It's been a while.
We actually take that off of all of our production systems.
Ah,
We don't let people access that things because there's been security holes in the past. So once we plug them, we try not to bring them back.
yeah. Well, you'd be happy to hear I'm building a Python 3 version of the Salt Minion.
I will.
Currently, it is. I built a 3001.1 version, and currently I'm trying to build a 3002, and I'm having, what did I do to build 3001.1? Because that worked and this doesn't. You know, what step did I forget?
And I wrote a note on this someplace and I can't find it.
But if there's things missing in AIX, I'll be all in the Salt Minion that you like or we've neglected. I'd be all ears to find what would make it better.
Okay.
It'll be awesome.
We do have some ideas on that. We've been going through our run books and some of the common tasks. We've actually made some custom modules for, which you'll hear a little bit in the presentation. But you know, to ease our pain, so to speak. So we've got our own kind of command set there.
What version of AIX are you using?
The 7.2.
7.2.
Yeah,
Par
I think.
7s or par 8s?
Say that again.
Par 7s or 8s?
8s.
8s. Great. Modern stuff. Well, relatively modern.
That'll be perfect.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna kick you off the stage for a little
Sure.
bit. Okay. All right. We've got it's about 1 minute after, and we've got a good bunch of people in the session so far. Are you interested in starting, or would you like to wait for just a moment, Brian?
We can start. It doesn't
Okay.
really matter.
Let's go ahead and get started then. Let me go ahead and introduce you. So, welcome everybody to this session about controlling and securing Unix and AIX with SaltStack with Brian Ford, who is from the gaming industry. Before we get started, just a couple of quick announcements. During the presentation, while Brian is speaking, you can double-click the slides that he's sharing to view them at a larger size. You're probably familiar with that at this stage in the conference, but it's worth mentioning again. Brian mentioned that he would love for this participation to be interactive and encourages you to ask questions in the chat. He'll keep an eye on the chat and will answer questions as he goes. So with that, I am going to give it over to you, Brian. Did we lose you, Brian? Oh, there you
Nope,
are.
I'm just
Okay.
trying to share.
Making sure. Okay, I will leave the stage now and let you have it.
All right, sounds good. I'm assuming everyone can hear me. And so if you're here for the PTSD therapy session, well, you might be here for the wrong thing, but this is the post-traumaless SALT deployment that we have gone through. And when I say traumaless, I mean traumaless. And we'll pick up on that as we kind of go through this presentation. So the market sector I'll be speaking about is the casino industry, which involves all aspects of entertainment, hospitality, and of course, casino gaming. And a little bit of a disclaimer, I'm unauthorized to utilize my company's name, logo, etc. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of me and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any company. Examples of analysis performed within the presentation are my view and experiences and may not represent the overall company's views or policies, which outside of legal speak means you're going to get the real deal. You're going to get my opinion because I experienced it. I was in the trench, so to speak. So this is just things we do in this day and age. So a little bit about the company I work for. We're the largest casino entertainment company in the U.S. and one of the world's most diversified casino entertainment providers. I've been working, well, I'll get into it in a little bit, but since I've been working in the industry, the casino business has evolved and changed and twisted, and it's always ever growing and ever moving. We tend to change markets. People tend to change how they gamble, how they like to be entertained. And the casino business wants to fulfill everyone's wants and desires. When I started, casinos were basically gaming environments with things like food and beverage, buffets, and things were very cheap. Now we're full entertainment environments. There's shows, there's food, there's drinks, there's esports, online gaming, online betting, and more coming all the time. So it's a very evolved and evolving and continually evolving business. It's quite interesting, actually, to work in the environments. So a little bit about me. I've been in the casino industry for almost 24 years. I started with a gaming vendor in 1996, and about 6 years ago changed to work at a casino itself, or actually a corporate. I've been in tech for hospitality and casinos since about 1988, different aspects from timekeeping systems, point of sale systems, you name it. I've developed casino systems, 3 actual patron management systems for a major casino vendor. I participated in 3 U.S. patents for the casino industry and 3 U.S. publications in the same industry. And I'm currently a Unix architect for the last 6 years. So a little bit about our environment. We're fairly virtualized. We've got AIX LPARs. We have AIX VIOs, which is basically a virtual I/O server. It's a special AIX LPAR that controls network and storage connections. We also have Red Hat on VMware. We have a few on KVM, and then we have some bare metal systems with Red Hat running Hadoop and the KVM itself for the KVM virtualization. So a little bit about our industry. We're one of the most regulated industries in the world. We have to comply with pretty much anything that a bank has to deal with, finance companies, HIPAA. We do self-insured, so we've got some HIPAA compliance, all the payroll, personal information. We do credit for players, so we've got credit lines, and we also have individual state jurisdictional requirements around gaming itself. So we have just about anything, give or take, building nuclear weapons that we have to comply with. We also have some internal things. We do, have a very formalized ITIL change management process. We have tons and tons and tons of audits. As you can see there, we have audits on audits, pre-audits, post-audits, test audits, and even more audits. And we also have something we call production access control, which any system that we have, anyone logs into, we know why they're logged in, we know when they're logged in, we've allowed them to log in, and we know what they've done while they're logged in. And we record and keep all of that information for posterity, actually for our internal controls. And we also have a cyber division that constantly pings us with pen tests and vulnerability assessments and tracks pretty much everything you can do in a system for vulnerabilities. And any questions on here? Nope, just a lot of chat, right? All right. So when we were deciding on using Salt, or actually at the time we were just deciding what to do with our automation. So periodically we do an evaluation of our pain points, and currently we do an FMEA, which is a Six Sigma evaluation, failure mode, and effects analysis, if any of you are familiar with that. In the past, we've done informal variations of that, but it's basically to gauge how painful things are, when they happen, how often they happen, so that we're putting our resources to the right areas. And this came up not as our highest priority. Over the 6 years I've been there, we had a few pain points that were addressed first. So about a little over a year ago, we came down to our, I wouldn't say automation itself because we did some other automation as well, but for our config management and ultimately our security CIS measurements. So we reviewed our problem areas. Automation was underutilized. Most work done by logging into each and every system. We have a couple hundred systems. About 2/3 of them are in the AIX environment. And, when you do the calculation, if we have to log in for a 5-minute task and it has to be done on each and every system, you've killed 2 man days just doing that 5-minute task. And I mentioned that we have a pretty intense ITIL process. So we require runbooks with every task we do, as well as our change management. We have, in our environment, we've got 2 architects, myself and another gentleman, and then we have a contract company that actually does the work, if you will. And in the past, we've had a lot of pushback from the contract engineers for any new work that's added to the pile. We, have to renegotiate in the past of, everything that was kind of project related as opposed to normal maintenance tasks, and lots of discussions around what was what. Lots of contract talks whenever something new came along, and just a different, basically business model. The contract company wanted to do things obviously cheaper and lower overhead. We wanted to pay lower overhead, but we wanted to get our jobs done. And so the 2 business models are, I wouldn't say at conflict, but they're definitely weren't aligned. Because of all this, we weren't reducing our technical debt, and new projects just were the straw that broke the camel's back. It became overpowering, and we have gone through a bankruptcy. We've been purchased and integrated with, or currently integrating with another company. And there's been pressures in the last 6 years that I've been there to lower costs, save money, do things better, faster, more of them, volume, all the things that go with saving money and getting value. So prior to our SALT implementation, we had a current automation. It was actually CF Engine. And the situation there was we had our engineering vendor had recommended that tool because they had experience with it, which turned out to not necessarily be a true statement. There was basically a single person that could use that tool set. So the lack of knowledge through the organization was existed. It was too cumbersome for small tasks. So again, back to the logging in each and every system. And it didn't have a good tool to do any reasonable integration with systems like our change management, ServiceNow, some of the databases that we keep status and stuff on. And the vendor was very uncooperative. And AIX was a afterthought. Any fixes and features, we usually had to call them and remind them that we were looking for that, and it didn't make the build. So it wasn't the best fit for our environment, but it was a working tool, which is why it took so long for it to come into the FMEA, and only, the last little over a year did we change the tool. So I don't see any questions so far, so hopefully I'm not missing any. All right, so when we went into the proof of concept, we put together a list of requirements, and they weren't very high marks. Basically, we had to do at least what the current CF engine did. Work both in AIX and Red Hat environments, monitor config changes, notify via email the differences when select configs changed, roll back certain configs, certain ones didn't. Like sudoers is a fine example. We want to know when something changed because that's an escalation. When you add a user to that, they get escalated privileges for a set of commands or quote unquote root. And we want to know when that changed. And typically it's around a change from our change management, but we don't necessarily want to roll it back because that's a change that is very likely desirable or wanted in the environment. No additional resources required. This was a $0 expenditure, so the licenses, cost, computer resources, all the stuff that went with it needed to reside in the same space. So the server, memory, CPU, license fees, labor, whatever, needed to fit in the same box. We needed to be able to quickly provision new servers, and we needed to comply with our corporate standards for security. So as a tool, it still needed to have security on logging in. It needed to talk to the servers in a secure manner. You know, the basic things that you'd want out of a tool. And some of the things that we don't allow in our environments are very common to a lot of tools. We don't allow SNMP or IPMI protocols on our network. In the corporate environment, they do exist in other environments, but not in the Unix AIX environments. And then there were some value added things that we wanted, reasonable features and messaging from an API so that we could do something a little bit further in implementation, integration with other systems, our ServiceNow, and reduce logins to systems for maintenance tasks, which is basically where our engineering group was spending all their time logging in and not getting rid of that technical debt and not moving projects forward fast and efficient enough. I feel like I'm really buzzing through this stuff and talking to myself a lot. So hopefully I haven't lost my mic.
Do you want me to hear just so you feel like you're talking to someone? Because I am.
Well, yeah. I just want a sound check every now and again. I talk to myself a lot, but I usually don't present to myself.
Okay,
so.
You're doing awesome. I'll stay here so that you can see that I'm reacting and interested in what you're saying.
Yeah. And some of this is kind of dry, I know, but. So as far as the proof of concept candidates, we kind of took this with a few criteria on how to pick what we wanted. Basic was the familiarity within our group of engineers and architects to tools. So basically we took recommendations on people's history, if you will, on what people have used and experience. And then we also had some vendors pushing us for things like Ansible. Every time you turn around, Red Hat is trying to sell you that. Puppet, Chef are very common. Salt, and we were actually proof of concept in with the open. And I know somebody's saying, how are you doing the open with AIX? Very painfully. But we did take the open version and deploy it. And the features that we were looking for did function quite well, actually, in that environment. And we did all of our proof of concept with the open on AIX and Red Hat. Some of the criteria that I myself have whenever I pick something is I look at third-party material. I don't like taking a vendor's word on just about anything. So especially when you're doing with tools and stuff, you can look at a vendor's documentation, and Salt's a prime example. There are bales and bales of documentation out there, and it is very good documentation. Finding what you need as an implementation sometimes is a little bit challenging, but it is all there. Just takes a little knowledge and the right terminology to get to where you're going. But I look at, did O'Reilly or PacketPub or somebody else put together a book on it? And is the book current with the versions, give or take one, of what's being deployed, or did they stop at 3 and it's now on 6? Those are all indicators of active projects, good knowledge, and the ability to get resources and to get knowledge and be able to actually run in the real world, so to speak. That's just my own personal preference, and I've worked a lot with open source projects, and I've worked a lot with purchased products and vendor pushed, and I've been a vendor as well. So some things I see important. Some people like it, some people don't.
Did Salt meet those requirements? Like, we have a lot of books out there, right, that have been written by third parties about Salt.
You did, yes. And there was training material. PacketPub has a training class on it. Linux Academy has a couple out there. So there is video training as well. Not to plug those names, but those are my experience with it. And it actually helped our engineering contractors too. We could point them at that information and they could ramp up their skill set a lot better and faster. So without clicking on the wrong buttons, for our POC results, CF Engine was an existing product, so it was in the mix for us to look at. We had the tool, we owned the tool, it was already somewhat set up. But we kind of evaluated it, and yes, listed, yes, we already paid, it fit all of our criteria, but it was fairly restrictive. The vendor was very uncooperative. We decided on Salt. We told them we weren't renewing our license, and they sent us a letter asking for proof that we had uninstalled the open agent on all of our clients, which in all my years, I have never had a vendor ask for that. Anyway, that's a whole nother experience and level with that particular vendor. And AIX was, again, always featured behind. Puppet and Chef was an okay tool. Puppet itself really doesn't stand alone. You have to get something else in there like Chef or M Collective or something else to do the tasks we needed to. Is that a cat?
Learn more about AIX.
That was a big cat.
He was right in front of the camera. Sorry.
Oh.
He wanted to zoom bomb. Sorry.
Gotcha. That's okay. So it was kind of, it would have worked. We weren't the happiest with the results. And our security cyber team has had issues with Chef in our environment in the past. So that was a no-go for Chef. Once we have a history with it, it's really hard to reverse that, even with new versions and patches. Ansible, we found, was a little bit too chaotic. It was everywhere. You can download a lot of stuff that is not necessarily current. It's not centralized. It's not state. Not really enterprise. You can add tower and it kind of gets there, but it also adds a bunch of cost. So Salt was the best fit for our environment. It was chosen due to the AIX support. The enterprise, we opted to not go with the open. We opted to purchase the enterprise, and primarily due to the AIX support. And along with that, we purchased the SecOps license that may reduce our cost in the future. I guess it's on the next slide. I'll get to that. So in our rollout, we were able to run concurrent with, now our rollout took a little less than 2 weeks. And in reality, it took about 2 days. The 2 weeks were really around our internal processes and change management. So we could run concurrent with our CF engine. So we installed the client, agent, whatever you want, the Salt Minion. And we initially put in beacons without any reaction to those beacons. We used iNotify for Linux, which I believe is really, really cool. Not available for AIX. And that's not a fault of Salt. That's a fault of the AIX kernel and its implementation, even though it is a Linux kernel that wasn't implemented with what iNotify needs. So we went with the Watchdog beacon. Now, Watchdog watches a whole directory. So that added a level of complexity for us, but it was easily resolved. So we basically took and created a directory and did symbolic links from all of the individual files we wanted to monitor and put them into that and put a salt rule around that to enforce those symbolic links. So those files are always there. We can always check them. And this makes us a little more real time. The philosophy of just high stating periodically wasn't something that fit into what our requirements needed to be. We needed a little bit more real time. It didn't have to be perfect real time, but we needed to be within a reasonable 15, 20, 30-second intervals. So these beacons then would fire off when one of the files would change. And then we wrote our own reactor using actually a cut and paste of documentation. So, the Salt Utils event and Salt client, we took pretty much right out of the documentation to retrieve this information. And then obviously we processed it how we wanted to. And in the case of like the Watchdog, they would come back with our linked folder. Well, if we were doing anything on that, we needed the right file name. So Etsy, whatever, as opposed to / this is where my Watchdog looks at. So we had to do a little gyration from that, but it's pretty easy to just go out and find from the symbolic link the longer actual link name with an ls command. So we used Salt to retrieve that and iterated it to what we needed it to be to apply the rules. So roundabout, we got exactly what we needed. All the parts were there. All the plumbing is there. All the, elbows and joints and, all the plumbing is there to build exactly what you need. And, for us, it was a very, as far as the reactor goes, we really wrote that during the proof of concept. But rolling out the config really was just getting the agents out there, getting the beacons out there, and then we actually automated the process to collect all the files with their content and write the salt rules. So we went out, grabbed a good version. We had a CF engine running, and we had a good gold, if you will, configuration, and we just pulled the files we needed, and got their ownership and mod and all that stuff, and created our salt rules just with a Python program to go out and get all that stuff. So all of our rules got written in an automagic way, so to speak. And then our segregation, when we were going through CF Engine had literally thousands of files for the, 80 config files that we actually have. And the thousands were out there because there were duplicates and triplicates of files for different environments. And what we kind of found out was our configs change when we go to a different data center, not because we're in a dev or a test or a production environment. So most of the configs were the same for dev, test, production. What we did with dev, test, and production, we needed the isolation for timing more than anything, so that we could roll out dev on a different day than test, on a different day than production, without complicating our life. So we added simply 3 grains to our environment and used one that came with it. So we use the OS grain, so we know that it's Red Hat or AIX. We have a grain for environment, so that depicts our dev, test, production, or DR. A location of which data center that particular server lives in, and an application, because we do have some exemptions for some rules, and we don't enforce certain things for certain applications because they have a security exemption for one reason or another, and typically have mitigation for that around that environment, firewalls, whatever. So our rollout became a lot simpler. We had overly complicated, the CF engine environment had files that we didn't need. That one could have been changed a little bit, but just because of history, evolution, whatever, it got overly complicated. And it didn't need to, and we're hoping that doesn't happen with Salt. Right now, we are going through our old run books and finding anything that we've utilized frequently. We have created custom modules, especially for AIX. AIX, the disk, when we're provisioning extra storage space and disk from the SAN, the complete features aren't really there. So we've written our own modules to make that easier, and we can, provision disk from SAN with, 1 or 2 commands depending on the situation of that particular server. And, for the future, we're going to be integrating with our change management. So we'll use it a little bit as a monitor, which we already are. We're getting changes in emails on certain files. We'll use that to create incidents if there's a problem that shouldn't be in our environment. We'll create an incident automatically, or we'll send something to our Xenos for monitoring for further investigation. Let's see. I guess the overall analysis, I've kind of hit on a couple of these, but did we save money? Well, not totally. At this point, the costs were very, very equivalent. So hard money and cash paid out were about the same. Cost to deploy was almost non-existent, which when you're throwing out new tools, that's a pretty important part. That's usually the one that gets missed is how much does it cost you to actually put that tool in? It's usually kind of hidden because it's departmental man hours as opposed to a hard cost. But in reality, ours was fairly automated. And like I said, in reality, on the calendar, it took a couple weeks. But sorry about that. That's somebody calling me that my Social Security's been disabled and I'm going to jail. But anyway, the cost of deployment, very, very low. And then the SecOps part, we have licensed products. We pay CIS for our benchmarks, which once AIX has benchmarks available for CIS, we'll be able to roll that out and reduce that cost of license because we already own it in the SecOps that we purchased. We just don't have the benchmarks right now for AIX, hint, hint. The Linux ones we're going through right now, deploying those. It's a little bit different implementation than what we have, but it's still pretty straightforward, and we will start using that over the next few weeks and months. Value add, ease of use, contract company has embraced and utilizes it regularly. We're getting changes in that no longer say we're fixing this file. It's we're creating this salt rule and deploying it from a central. So the run books become less time consuming, very repetitive, 4 or 5 lines as opposed to 4 or 5 pages. And of recent, our backlog has been caught up. So we're in actually pretty good shape in, a year's worth of time. And I think we've got some time left here. So
yeah, we have about I think 20 minutes left that we can do, or no, maybe it's 10 minutes. Yeah, 10 minutes left to where we can do Q&A. So for those of you who are watching, feel free to ask some questions in the chat. I'm sure David in particular might have some questions for you, but I have some to kick us off if you'd like. My first question is, how long did you say you've been deploying Salt in your system? Like how long have you had it up and running?
About a year.
Nice. So this has been the results of about a year comparison, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we got it. I think our proof of concept was about this time last year, and our implementation was actually between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So it's been a little bit less than a year.
Yeah. I'm also curious. I was just curious, which audit is the most painful for you to comply to? Which one's the most daunting, would you say?
Well, I mean, SOX audit is constant, right? Our audits are actually fairly easy because our systems are built around them to kind of self-audit. The hardest part is when we get new personnel that aren't familiar with the information that we have or want something new and different, and they want it retroactively. So most of the audits are actually use the same information, and we pretty much log and keep track of everything that happens on the system, one way or another. Obviously, AIX and Linux are a little bit different from each other, but most of that information is pretty easy to get since we already have it. So it's more of a formatting and new question. User audits are constant, and SOX audits are constant. So those are the ones that are most painful, not because of what you have to give them. It's just that they're always there.
Makes sense. Yeah. So since you're in such a highly regulated industry, do you have higher security standards than maybe other industries, or are there a lot of things that you have to be constantly vigilant for in your industry?
Yes. I mean, it's big fines if you're out of compliance with the particular regulator for the casino. A lot of the systems can't even leave the jurisdiction that the casino's in. I don't manage those systems, luckily. So I kind of dodge a bullet there. I'm familiar with them because of my vendor days, but there's a lot of industries that have regulation, financial, stock market, all the new, the California personal data protection laws. International has different versions of the same thing. Those are all things that we have to be very vigilant about because of, big fines, and basically bad reputation is bad for us. Putting us into fines hurts us financially. The business is, pretty competitive, and, little things like that matter.
Could see that. So James in the chat asks a question. He says, did I understand your slide correctly that you're using grains to target dev, test, production, and application, for example?
Correct. So as far as our top file, we break out different configurations based on sometimes application, but typically only if the application has an exemption for a certain, certain applications can't lock down the temp directory because they run stuff out of them, right? So one of our CIS rules says you have no exec on the temp directory, and certain applications need an exemption for that. So the rule is a little bit different for the file systems in that particular case. So we have some exemptions based on that application. The dev, test, prod, DR typically aren't in our top file. They're more of when we do something that gets deployed into our environment. So, we have process where we will put it in dev. Within 3 days, we'll put it in test. Within a week, we'll put it in prod. Within DR, we'll put it in a day after prod. So whatever that cadence is, and I'm just arbitrarily saying those dates, those are really for rollout more than they are for, what content goes. Application and environment are typically what we use for that.
Very good. David asks,
How important?
oh yeah,
How important is it to have CIS for AIX? Very, very, very important. If we don't have it in through Salt, we have it through CIS, and we have to have it. It's our corporate standard, and one way or the other, we have to have it. Otherwise, we're out of compliance with our internal controls.
He says, what are you doing now till it becomes available?
Same thing we did before we got Salt, and that is we have the CIS benchmarks. So we actually run that Java bench test and run those benchmarks. We pull the information back, actually both the HTML output and the text output, and we publish those on our internal website for viewing, and you can look at each individual, and we actually put a grid up of the scores and kind of a column row thing with all the tallies of what we passed and what we failed and what are exempt and what aren't.
I know this isn't necessarily the best news, but you can create your own custom compliance modules using our compliance SDK. If you're interested in that solution, I don't know if that would be at all feasible or if it would be worth it to you, but that's just a
actually yes. And I have prior to the VMware deal, I have talked to our salespeople about actually doing
nice.
that type of thing, and they weren't 100% aware. I guess they haven't given me the feedback anyway that is available, but I am more than happy to do that type of stuff and contribute to that because we need it one way or the other. This will save us money, and if we can make everyone else's life better, cool.
I can actually help you with that. I will contact you afterwards and give you some help. Although I will say we, speaking as the technical writer, we could improve the documentation for that. But we do have resources.
I can help you with that
There
too.
we go, right? Anyway,
Right.
very good. Yeah, so I will reach out to you after that and see what we can do. We're also improving our
That sounds like a
AIX
plan.
documentation, by the way. So if that's good news for you.
Yeah, it is, because there's actually where a lot of the information comes is you've had I think 2 or 3 years ago, a previous developer that kind of put a bullet list out there on a blog saying, this is what we have, this is what we don't have, this is what we need to have. And that helped actually tremendously, because going through the things and finding out whether they did or didn't work on AIX was a little bit tedious.
Yeah, I could see that. Speaking of, David, come on, you have to have even more questions about AIX. Like, you're welcome to chime in with them. So.
Well, and one of the things too is we actually have it on our VIOs. We've put the Salt on the VIOs, which is not a full. I mean, there's VIO behavior, and then there's an AIX kind of limited kernel there, and it works. The installation is a little flaky. We have to actually unregister the service and re-register because it doesn't happen right for some reason. But there is a few things in the VIO specific that it'd be kind of cool to have too.
David was wondering where you found the list of things missing that you'd like to have.
It was on a blog on Salt somewhere. I'm sure I have the link someplace.
We'll have to hit you up for the link.
Yeah, I'll dig it out. I think I've got it in my OneNote. So I'm pretty sure I can pull it out.
Very good. All right. We've got just a couple more minutes left. Okay. So sorry. David clarifies. No, what is the list of things missing that you want at your site? That's what he's asking.
Oh,
Oh, and he did write the list, just so you know.
Oh, okay. He wrote the other list.
Yes, the one that you found helpful.
Gotcha. So what's missing now, a lot of it has to do with the services and the disk and we've really already written what we need. So as far as things missing that we want, the CIS is the big one. The functionality at this point we've got covered. As far as I can kind of shoot you a list of what all we've done, but most of it has to do with provisioning disks and starting services, because not all services are created equal. Starting them sometimes is different, sometimes is supported, and sometimes isn't. So it really comes down to how you're starting the service. And if you look at our rules where we change a config and need to restart a service, we run a Salt command run and do it differently based on what the service is. So it's easy enough to get around, but it'd be nice to have because I went looking for the service functionality and that didn't work. Oh, that worked here, but it didn't work there. And it gets a little confusing. And I get it, services are different everywhere you go. And AIX has at least 3 implementations I'm aware of how to do a daemon service.
Very good. Well, super interesting. And yeah, David says he would definitely like to chat with you about that, it sounds like. So I'll help the two of you connect after the session. So
sounds good.
Yeah, very good. I think we're about at the time for our session. So I want to thank you, Brian. This has been super interesting. I hope things are okay in Vegas with the coronavirus. I know Vegas is one of the areas getting hit kind of hard right now, but hopefully things will be pretty good and we'll get through 2020.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. There's lots of layoffs. The visitors aren't coming, so the casinos are running against different times at this point. things are getting better, but they're still not great.
Still not back to where they were, huh? Well,
No.
well, if it makes you feel any better, I was really upset my trip to Vegas got canceled for me. So, oh well.
Well, at least there's some new rules around conventions and
Yeah.
entertainment and stuff. So some of that stuff's opening back up. It's, getting the visitors right now. Arizona and California are coming in, but not a whole lot from anywhere else. Flights, international, definitely not. Flights from different places, are hit and miss. They're definitely not the volume we're used to.
Yeah. Well, let's hope things recover in 2021. And yeah, in the meantime, hopefully Salt will help you kind of scale to meet the demands during these rough times. So should be good.
Yep. I hope everyone stays safe and
Yeah. All
gets
right.
through this as well.
Well, that was excellent, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing, and look forward to seeing you later. By the way, Murphy mentions he has a booth open if you'd like to talk to him there. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and joined us for this session. And we'll see you all next time.
Okay.